speak up so we know you're here?
I cannot.
Hi, this is Rosemary. I'm here.
Oh, you
Hi,
are?
Rose.
I
Fantastic.
am.
Good, thank you.
Thank you.
All
Great.
right, then we are ready to roll. So this is Tuesday, June 16th. It's 7:01, and we are convening the Common Council Ordinance Committee regular meeting today and the public hearing. First, I'll take a roll call if that's okay. So if you could just indicate your presence by saying here. David Hoovelman.
Present.
Dominique Johnson.
Here.
Tom Keegan.
Here.
Manny Langella.
Here.
Tom Livingston.
Here.
Kadeem Roberts. And I'm the chair, Lisa Shanahan, and I'm here. And the first thing we're going to do tonight is a public hearing on, well, we'll have a discussion on and a vote on the NORAC Facilities Construction Commission sections 30 through 15 through 30 through 17. So are there any of the public here who want to make a comment on this?
Yes, we do have Diane Laricella with her hand up.
Okay, great. So if we could hear from Diana, that would be great.
Diane?
Diane, are you?
I unmuted myself. Can you hear me?
We can.
All right. Good evening, everyone. Just wanted to reiterate some comments I had made at previous committee meetings on this topic of the Facilities Construction Committee. I know that Tom and others had a lot of discussion about the extra burden of having 2 meetings in a row. And I understand the type of burden that could have on council members. However, I had asked former Mayor Alex Knopp whether he had been, and this was about 2 or 3 weeks ago, right after your last month's meeting, if he had been consulted so that he could give his opinion as to why he began the extra entity called the Facilities Construction Committee. And at that time, he told me he had not. I think that his opinion would be of value because the very reasons that I had mentioned, that it's good to have opinions other than the staff, the consultants, or the council members. There are people that have specialties related. Now, one thing I am happy about, if you should decide to abolish the Facilities Construction Committee formally, is that there is a provision for, on a, I guess, a project by project basis for a special, I don't know what the entity is called for, I don't remember. And I hope that that is what occurs, especially where I have seen a real reduction of thinking outside the box. And that, of course, as many of you probably expect me to say, and that is with sustainable energy production at our school and public buildings. And right now, the consultants and the staff that are utilized to give you opinions about this have, I think, just done, have not optimized the potential to save money for the taxpayers and also utilize clean, renewable energy. And there's plenty of examples of this. I know we are finally going to have some buildings that have solar panels on them, but it's more than just about solar panels. And as with Jefferson School, we still haven't optimized that site. And I'm awaiting to hear back from the chairman, Tom Livingston, about whether carports should be considered, not whether the staff does not want to deal with that issue. So I'm hoping that we'll have a discussion about this, but right now I would say that the council has, most of you have to serve on 3 to 4 committees. The whole reason why Alex Knopp started facilities construction was because the council members, instead of spending 6 or 7 hours in one night, 1 or 2 of you would spend a little bit of time reviewing things with local builders and other specialties. Because in the last few years, ever since Mr. Livingston became a councilman, those meetings, I understand from his discussion were not productive and it was hard to get a quorum is not necessarily a reason to dispel or dispense with that entity. It might just mean we have to pivot and look at a different management structure. For instance, having those meetings a different night of the week, or having them later in the day, because some of the private people, that construction people on that facilities construction committee, worked a full day and it was hard for them to get to a 6 o'clock meeting. So again, it's all up to you folks on the council. I understand that. I do want you to consider the need to have other voices other than those I mentioned, but thank you and good luck in your deliberations.
Thank you, Diane. Larry, is there anybody else in queue for wanting to make a public comment?
If there's anyone else, you can raise your hand electronically and I will unmute you. I see none.
Okay, so we'll move on to the discussion of Code of Ethics, Section 32-12.
Oh, Lisa,
Yes.
it's Brian Candela. I just wanted to make the point that I did not receive any emails from anyone concerning Norwalk Facilities Construction Commission discussion for tonight.
Thank you, Brian. I should have asked you that question publicly. Okay, great. So we'll move on to the Code of Ethics, Section 32-12. It seems as though there's no public comment on that at this time. And Brian, you didn't receive any emails on that as well. Is that correct?
That is correct. I received no emails concerning the second public hearing concerning Code of Ethics, Section 32-12, Board of Ethics.
Okay, terrific. So we're at the place now where we can move both of these different sections onto the Common Council for a vote. So can I have a motion on the first one, which is the Norwalk Facility Construction Commission?
Actually, excuse me, Lisa, if I could. I think this is the public hearing discussion of the council, and if I might, maybe I can respond to a couple of Ms. Loricella's.
Oh, yeah, that'd be terrific.
Alan's not here, so bear with me if I do my best to be Alan. But I just want to comment on a couple of things, because Diane mentioned that the commission had been formed by Alex Knopp, which is absolutely correct. As Alan discussed in some detail last meeting, that was a very different time, and city construction projects were done in a different manner, and the commission was set up, as Diane correctly said, to save some time. The land use committee meetings were going on way too long. Over the years, before I got on the council and the committee mission, things have evolved, and they no longer, the process has been streamlined. There've been outside experts brought in, and there's not the same need, as Alan would tell you, that there was when Alex put this in place. I should tell you, I've said this before, I've been on the commission for 4.5 years, my tenure on the council, and I can fairly say it's, how shall I say, not the most constructive use of anybody's time. 90% of the items are repeated in the land use meeting. We have a difficulty getting attendance, and I don't think changing the date or anything like that would make a difference. The reason we have a difficulty getting attendance is people realize that we're really not doing much of this commission, and we've heard that from people. As for the idea of losing out on expertise, there was no we had outside people come in, that some of the members were from the community perhaps, but the expertise we can still bring in if we need to, and we have. And so I don't think we'll be losing that. I think in my mind, what we're losing is a layer of bureaucracy that hasn't served any real purpose and does not serve a purpose today, and may have at one time, but not today. So I support moving this forward to the council for approval.
That would be great. So is that a motion, Tom?
Oh, yes. I move the item to the common council.
Okay, great. So we've closed the public discussion. We've had a motion to move the NFCC sections onto common council. I guess I'll take a roll call if that's okay. So starting with David Hoovelman.
Aye.
Dominique Johnson.
Yes.
Tom Keegan.
Yes.
Rennie Langella.
Yes.
Tom Livingston.
Yes.
Kadeem Roberts.
Aye.
And I too vote yes. So that's a unanimous vote. So the next thing that we are going to close the public discussion
Oh,
on.
Lisa,
Did I forget?
sorry to interrupt. No, I just want to make sure that, that this is being moved to the Common Council with the draft as currently identified in the Ordinance Committee agenda packets.
It is.
Okay.
Thank you
Thank
for
you.
the clarification.
Yep.
And while we're moving the Code of Ethics, it will be in the same form as what we had in the packet as well, just to be clear. And does anybody want to make any comments before we make the motion to move that to the Common Council for a vote? Tony, you're on the call, I think somewhere. Can't, oh, Alan came on the call. Alan missed out. Tony, is anything you want to say as the ethics?
No, I have
representative?
nothing to say or comment on it. I was hoping I could, learn that there was going to be additional comment, but it's fine.
Great.
We also have, Lisa, we also have Geraldo Williams from the Ethics Committee who joined us tonight.
Oh, fantastic. Anything you'd like to say about this before we make a motion? I think you're muted, maybe.
Okay. Nope. Thank you.
Take a no.
No comments.
Alrighty, can I have a motion to move the Code of Ethics, Section 32-12 to Common Council? Thanks, Tom Keegan. David seconded, and I'll do the roll call on that if we could. David Hoobelman,
Aye.
Dominique Johnson,
Aye.
Tom Keegan,
Yes.
Manny Langella,
Yes.
Tom Livingston,
Yes.
Kadeem Roberts,
Aye.
and Lisa Shanahan, which is me. I vote yes as well. So again, in the same form that it was put together in our packets.
Lisa, just one thing, there's on 3212C 5E subsection 3, there was at the end of a bracket that I neglected to delete, and that's the only thing that I could see that needed to be changed. But again, it's just a bracket that has nothing to do with the ordinance. It was in there for comment purposes.
So with that amendment, does anybody want to change their vote? We'll do it that way. The vote stands. Great, thank you. So now,
Thank you to Tony and Geraldo for assisting, and the rest of the Board of Ethics for assisting in getting these revisions done, so the Ordinance Committee could deal with them.
great.
Thank you, Brian.
Thank you, everybody. And you guys want to do other things? We say thank you for coming.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. So now
Thank you. Have a good night.
public comment in general on our agenda. Is there anybody who would like to speak to other agenda items? Hearing none, I will move on to acceptance of the minutes of our last meeting, which was on May 19th, 2020. And does anybody have any comments or changes to the minutes as they stand? Tom, you do?
I do. Yeah, just on page 3, the paragraph right before the motion, it says the committee members, the ordinance and proposed changes in language. I think the word, it's missing the word, the committee members discussed the ordinance and proposed changes in the language. The word discussed is missing.
Thank you.
I will add that in on page 3.
Any other comments or corrections? Hearing none, I'll make a motion that we accept the minutes for May 19th, 2020, starting with David.
Aye.
Dominique Johnson.
Aye.
Tom Keegan.
Yes.
Thank you. Manny Langella.
Yes.
Tom Livingston.
Yes.
Dean Roberts.
Aye.
Lisa Shanahan. So the minutes have been accepted unanimously. All right, so our next order of business is the discussion and the vote on the enterprise zone, chapter 36. And I wanted to, that has been circulated among the committee members. We worked closely with Jessica and Sabrina to go through and hone the language. And I thought we would just discuss any questions or thoughts people might have at this time on the language that was circulated. Minutes. Any, Jessica or Brian? Brian, do you want to quickly summarize what we're trying to accomplish?
Sure. So one of the things that we tried to do with the initial draft was to make it so that our enterprise zone ordinance tracked the language from the Connecticut General Statutes. to make sure that we were in compliance with what the language was in those applicable statutes. That was done at the first meeting, and subsequent discussions after that meeting changed some of the language surrounding it. As you can see in 36.1, it was mostly just still trying to get across the same point about how people could see the map or understand where this enterprise zone would apply. So in 36.1, we amended it to say 32-71 at the last meeting, prior to the last meeting, and that was in the original draft from the last meeting. But since then, some language changes were made just to make 36.1 sound better and cleaner. And that was also the case in 36.2 as well, specifically with the tax years and the abatements for those years. After the last meeting, there was some work in trying to understand who was going to administer this enterprise zone ordinance and to make the flow of the chapter flow better so that it was more logical in terms of people, whether they be employees of the town or elected politicians, committee members, or regular residents trying to understand the enterprise zone ordinance. We tried to place it in some kind of logical step. And so that was the effort that was made. Those are some of the changes that were made. Again, all of the language that we could take directly out of the state statute, we did. And let me know if anyone else has anything else to add.
One thing we wanted to add also, or highlight, is two things. One, making it a responsibility of the DECD to make periodic reports to the Common Council to alert the council about how this is going. And then we also thought it most important to have a sunset provision, which is 36-4, and the chapter will expire or be repealed on July 1st, 2030, unless the Common Council extends it. So I think those are two other really important additions we made to the statute. Tom, I saw you.
That is correct.
Yeah, Tom, I saw your hand raised. Did you have a question?
Yeah, Lisa, thank you for bringing up the sunset clause. That's what my question was about.
Great. Anybody else? Oh, Dominique.
Yes, just to follow on that real quick, do those last two sections, 3 and 4, take from the state statute as well? I mean, is this, I guess my question for both is if this is pretty standard to have the reports every 3 years and then to have a roughly 10-year sunset provision. Just wanted to make sure that that's pretty standard given our discussion last time.
Well, in this case, I think that we actually added that language. That's in addition to what the state does. We thought it was important to have, well, and Jessica, maybe you want to comment on that a little bit.
Yeah, so the ordinance reads very like the state statute, except for those particular sections that mention the sunset clause. The research that we've done is that no community that's adopted an enterprise zone actually has a sunset clause that they've appended onto the ordinance. It is something that we will have to get state approval on, but it's also language that was reflected at one time, which is why we did the 10-year review before we looked at the expansion. So that language was there in some way, shape, or form before. We've strengthened it by doing the periodic reviews because we think 10 years is too long. After the 10 years, the Common Council would need to vote to extend the enterprise zone timeline to allow it to go beyond the 10 years. But that is the one piece that is not in the state statute.
That is correct. And just so all the Ordinance Committee members understand, this ordinance is similar to the noise ordinance in that we can approve something by way of Ordinance Committee and then Common Council, but before it can go into effect, the state has to approve the language and make sure that it's the way that they want. They could simply, if it goes through our process and the state says that's fine the way it is, then we can put it in effect whenever that is. There might also be some give and take like we saw with the noise ordinance where we submitted it and the state came back with some comments. And then we had to respond to those comments and then resubmit the other portions that had to be changed. So again, us approving this by way of Ordinance Committee and Common Council, we still need the state to review it and bless it and approve it before it can go into effect.
Right. And just to comment further on that, we've had questions from the Ordinance Committee members to connect with the state and understand what the criteria look like or what would be required for approval. And we have been corresponding back and forth with the state. We don't have the specific information as of yet, but we have the contact at the state, and we have been attempting to get more specific information, but we don't have the specifics as of yet.
So in terms of process, just to go forward, we would be voting on this today to go to a public hearing for our next meeting in July. And then after that, depending upon public comment, we would be forwarding it on to the Common Council for voting on in August.
That's
So,
correct.
right?
Yep.
So
Thank
can
you.
does any, oh, David, looks like your hand's going up.
Just so I'm understanding, so the state won't accept looking at this language until it's been voted by this committee and the legislative body being the Common Council. They won't.
That's
look
correct. That's
okay.
Correct.
David. Yeah.
So David, just so, because I think some of you guys might not have been on when we submitted this, the noise ordinance the first time. When the noise ordinance was approved by the Common Council, I then took the completed ordinance that had been approved and forwarded it on to the DEP representative, who then sent it on to his superiors. And then they came back with comments. They also could have come back and just said, it's fine as is, you can implement it whenever you want. So I would imagine that if this does go to public hearing after this meeting, and if it does get sent to Common Council eventually, and if it is approved by Common Council, it would be then sent to the appropriate state representative who would send it up the food chain. They would come back, either say, yes, you can do it as is, or no, these are the issues that we have, go back, discuss it further. We then have to bring it back to Ordinance Committee, make changes, have another public hearing, and then send it back on to Common Council if they came back with comments that we would have to make changes to the ordinance on.
Great. Thanks, Brian, for that
Yep.
clarification. Appreciate it.
Does anyone have other questions regarding the ordinance as we've drafted it now, or concerns about process? Looks like we're okay. So can I have a motion to move this on to public hearing for our July meeting?
Yes, so moved.
Great. And then I will take a vote, starting with David. You moved it, so I'm voting, you're voting yes.
I'm voting for it.
Dominique Johnson,
Yes.
Tom Keegan,
Yes.
Manny Langella,
Yes.
Tom Livingston,
Yes.
Kadeem Roberts. And I too vote yes. So that's a unanimous that we move it on to our next meeting for public hearing. And
Thank
then,
you.
thank you very much, Jessica. I'm sure you have things you want to get along to. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jessica. Knight.
Thank you, Jessica.
Thanks, everybody.
Good luck tomorrow.
Thank you, Tom. Counting the minutes.
I have a new puppy in the household. You might be hearing a little whining. I apologize for that. The last thing on our agenda for this evening, well, I have two things for the agenda. We have a new code of ethics section, which is on prohibited gifts. I'm just bringing it to your attention to look at. We'll have a discussion about it next week. Next meeting, if you don't mind. So I don't think we need to get too much into the details tonight. Mostly what we think we're doing is changing the numbers by which one needs to not accept gifts. So Brian, anything else we should say about that? We're just trying to clean up the ethics and keep it.
Sure. So, so again, then our current ordinance committee has had the experience of dealing with 3212. I think as a background to what I explained when you guys first joined the committee, that there had been numerous other sections, code of ethics sections, that had gone through the process, had been approved by the ordinance committee and then the Common Council. Currently, as it stands, 3212 is now going to Common Council for approval, or we'll see what they say. 32.8 and 32.4 are the last two sections of this fairly large chapter, chapter 32. So 32.8, I decided to ask Lisa if she would consider putting it on at least at the end of the tail end of this meeting, so that all of the committee members could have a chance to take a look at it and digest it and see what kind of comments or thoughts they had. This 32.8 has gone through a couple of iterations. The initial iteration was what we had originally submitted to the Ordinance Committee about a little bit more than a year ago. Since that point, Ordinance Committee made some comments at that time. It went back to Board of Ethics, and Board of Ethics dealt with the comments that were made pursuant to 32.12, 32.4, and 32.8. Those were the last three sections that there was some disagreement on between the Board of Ethics and the Ordinance Committee as it pertained to language or potentially what was in the ordinance itself. So what you see in front of you in 32.8 is the Board of Ethics attempt to deal with the issues that were raised by the prior Ordinance Committee. What you see in red ink are the changes that were made. What you see in black ink is what is currently in the current version of 32.8 as it stands right now in the ordinance code. The opportunity here was to provide you this language basically a month in advance so that you would have the opportunity to look at it. And just to let you know that there's one other section besides this that the Ordinance Committee would have to consider if 32.12 goes to Common Council. This one's on prohibited gifts. The other one is on, which is probably a more difficult topic, which is conflicts of interest. But this one's on prohibited gifts. It's basically about not only physical gifts, but other types of gifts, numerical numbers, social courtesies, things of that nature, as you'll see in here. Attendance at events was something that had been discussed by the prior Ordinance Committee. So, take some time, look at it. I'm assuming it'll be at the July meeting as well, but I wanted to give you all the opportunity a month in advance to have a chance to take a look at this for not just a couple days in advance, but to look at it for some period ahead of time so that you had a chance to come up with any comments or questions that you might have about it.
That's great. Thank you, Brian.
Yep.
Two other new business items that we're going to be following up on. Both Dominique and I have been getting notes about dog leash laws. So we'll be considering that in the near future, see how much time we have maybe in July or August to tackle that. So just putting that out as new business. And then Brian, you were going to update us on the gender neutral language at this meeting as well. Any news?
Yes. Let me just pull that up real quick. Hold on one second. So again, we had received an email. Some of the council members had received an email about how the ordinances and the charter had language that was not gender neutral. I have been going through the ordinances as time allows to pull the ordinance off of the website and make changes to gender neutral language, whether it's him or his or chairman, other issues, himself specifically. I've gone through not a majority, I'd say about maybe half of the ordinances so far. Right now I am up to, I just finished chapter 64, loitering for solicitation. So, I mean, you could take a look at the ordinance website yourself to see how many ordinances remain. What I can say is that the ordinances that remain, some of them are quite large. For example, Parks and Recreation, some of the Department and Public Works ordinances are quite lengthy. Noise ordinance still has to be gone through. Hopefully there won't be too many changes, seeing as we just went through that. So I will continue to update the Ordinance Committee about how much more progress I'm able to make between now and the July 2020 meeting. Thank you.
Brian, we promise that we're going to try to write ordinances that aren't going to give you more work to do in the near future. I have a really unhappy dog up front. So I think that is pretty much all we have on the agenda. Does anybody else have something they'd like to bring up? Otherwise, we could make a motion to adjourn. Anybody want to? Tom's made the motion to adjourn. Everybody in favor? All right. Thank you very much. That was 30 minutes. Very good.
Good night.
Thank you, guys.
Good night.
Very
Good
good to
night,
see everybody.
Good night, everybody.